Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me for another restful night of true scary stories to help you fall asleep. Today, we're going to be doing something brand new on this channel. Since September of 2023, I've been saving all of the stories that I read without any background noise. So what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be re-releasing those old stories with brand new background ambiance for you all to enjoy. This first one that we're going to be doing is true scary babysitter stories with a cozy campfire in the background. If you have any suggestions for any type of background ambiance that we should have, please put them down in the comments section below, and I'll make sure that I can try to find some and maybe use your suggestions in a future video. But for now, without further ado, lay back, relax, and enjoy these true scary stories. This happened like 20 years ago, so the details are a bit hazy. I was in middle school. I lived in an upper middle class neighborhood in a little New England town with virtually no crime. I had just started babysitting, had just taken a whole babysitting course at a local hospital, and after putting up some flyers, I got my first gig. It was at a house in my neighborhood, about a 5-minute walk from my house. They had an older girl, who was maybe 8 or 9, and a young toddlerish age boy. Their mom was giving me a rundown of their routine and giving me a little tour of their house. We went into her son's bedroom, and she said something to the effect of, that's odd. Why is his window open?" and quickly shut the window, and seemed somewhat distracted from that point on. She hurried through the rest of the tour, and then told me to go hang out with the kids while she finished getting ready. About 2 minutes later, she hurries in, sort of hustles us out the door and outside. I'm pretty confused at this point, but being an awkwardly shy middle school-aged girl, I just go along with it. Once we get to the driveway, she pulls me aside and tells me that she went back to her bedroom after noticing that the window was open and saw most of her jewelry was missing. Soon after telling me this, about 10 cop cars come flying in. Cops run out with guns drawn, the whole works. Cops tell me to leave, so I head home pretty terrified. Turns out, the burglar, who had broken in the night before, was still hiding in the son's closet, right next to where we were standing when the mom realized that the window was open, and something was off. I don't really like to imagine how that could have gone had she not noticed the open window and left me there for the night with her 2 kids. Needless to say, that was the beginning and the end of my babysitting career. I was babysitting my niece a couple of years ago. She's 6 now, so she would have been 3 back then. I put her to bed, read her a story, gave her a cuddle, and then went down to watch a movie, and I ended up falling asleep on the couch in the living room. I don't know how much later it was, but I woke up to something grabbing my ankle. My eyes shot open, and I freaked out. I shook my leg as hard as I could. Bad idea. She'd managed to unfasten her door, climb over 2 different baby gates, and get down the stairs without giving herself an injury. All to ask me if I could read her another story. We don't tell her mother about the time that I almost drop-kicked her daughter across the living room. I was playing hide and seek with the 3 kids that I was babysitting. They were 3, 6, and 9, and I was seeking. Well, I found the oldest and the youngest, but I couldn't find the middle child. After 30 minutes of searching, the house wasn't that big. I just wanted to die. I couldn't believe that I actually lost a child. It was like a bad movie. So I called the parents, ready to have the worst from them on account of losing their child. I told them what had happened and I'm scared crapless, and they just laughed and said, "Did you specify the boundaries?" The what? Turns out, this stinking middle child hid in a bush in their neighbor's front yard, a place that she had hidden before, which is how the parents knew about it, because I didn't specify the boundaries of hide and seek. Even though the parents weren't mad, I still have nightmares about that. I'm sharing this on behalf of my sister. When we were younger, our parents decided that we were old enough to be left home by ourselves. Most of them worked weekdays during the summer holidays, so we had to babysit our younger brothers. One particular day, I was feeling dizzy and I wasn't thinking straight. I was really tired, but being 11, all I wanted to do was play video games. I grabbed my Nintendo DS and I sat on the couch, while my sister watched TV. Suddenly, I started seizing. I shut off completely. My sister, with no experience at all, rang an ambulance. My parents and grandma telling them what had happened. I was raced to the hospital within 10 minutes of seizing. We did live fairly close. My younger brothers started crying, thinking I had died when they saw me on the stretcher. I was very blue at the time. My parents cried too. My dad has epilepsy, and his family has a history, so it was a horrible feeling that it was passed down to me. However, my sister was calm and collected, serving as the backbone of the family that day. She's never received praise for saving me, despite this happening multiple times. Even my brothers have learned to help out. One even picked a lock when I was seized in the bathroom. I'm on medication and I take them daily, but I'm really indebted to my sister for being a real trooper through my first ever seizure. I was 14, looking after a 10 and 7-year-old, overnight stay at a house in the sketchier part of town. I lived in Winnipeg, so there was some gang activity in that area of town. Everything started out normally, just hanging out, watching TV, until a kid knocked on the door, about 16 years old, and asked if the two could come and hang out. I said no, because I had no idea if that was okay, and I told him sorry. This guy messages the two kids that I'm looking after on their phone or whatever, and they want to go hang out with him, but still unsure about it. A bigger teenager wanting to hang out with the two young kids seemed weird, even at 14, so I said no. The kids eventually just decided that they were going whether I said yes or not, and left the house while I was in the bathroom. I'm a 14-year-old, scared crapless of the neighborhood, so I never got very far from the house looking for them. I called the mom of the kids right away, and she came back from her party very quickly and found the kids in no time, dragged them back to the house, and I witnessed the scolding of a lifetime. She apologized to me a ton, but I just felt bad about the whole thing. I got paid $100 for it though. I was 11 and babysitting for our neighbor who was going through a nasty divorce. She had 2 sons who were 8 and 1. She leaves to go on her date and says that she'll be back around midnight. She doesn't tell me where she's going, and I have no way to contact her because it's the 80s and no one has cell phones. I'm watching TV. The boys are asleep. Everything's fine. Suddenly there's a knock on the door. Then banging and drunken cursing. "Cheryl, you stupid woman. I know you're in there. Open the door." I'm frozen looking at the door when the oldest boy comes flying down the stairs and runs to the door yelling, "Daddy's home." I grab him and pull him away from the door. By this time, the ex-husband had gotten into his truck to go get his gun to teach that woman a lesson. He's banging on the door and threatening to start shooting through it if no one opens it. I grab both kids and run out the back door and across the street to to my house, where my mom calls the police. When the police arrive a few minutes later, they find the ex-husband on Cheryl's porch. He gets arrested, and I wait with the kids at my house for their mom to show up. Cheryl shows up, is totally unfazed by the story, and doesn't even pay me because she lost her wallet at the restaurant. When I was a preteen, I babysat a lot. Once, I was babysitting two sisters. One was about 6, and the other was an infant. The 6-year-old was down the street at a birthday party, and the baby and I were just chilling and watching TV. The parents were off at a movie, and about 30 minutes after they left, there was a knock at the door. I got up and looked through the small window in the door to see this dude in a shirt with an XL energy tag and a clipboard. He gives me this talk about checking a gas meter in the basement. I had this instinctual gut feeling that something was wrong, and I tell him that I'm the babysitter. Give me a minute and I'll call the parents to see if they forgot to tell me about an appointment. So I head to the kitchen to get the phone and call up the mom. I also check to make sure that the back door was locked. She starts freaking out and assures me that they don't have an account with Excel and tells me that they're leaving the theater immediately. I go back to the door and explain that I won't be letting him in. He starts getting pushy with me and telling me that it's really important and it's a safety issue, etc. I didn't see any Excel Energy van or car on the street out front, and I'm beginning to get nervous. Luckily, the parents called a neighbor who showed up and demanded that the guy leave the property. The guy ran off and walked around the corner, so we didn't get a vehicle description. But the police came and took my statement as soon as the parents got home. A few days later, the parents were telling me that a similar guy had gone to a neighbor's house and had tried to intimidate his way into her house as well. I babysat two young boys one summer. One was about 12 and the other 5. Their mom worked during the day, and their dad worked all night. So I picked them up shortly after he got home in the mornings, and took care of them at my house while he slept all day. The parents were very close with my own parents at the time, so I knew them pretty well prior to me setting for them. The dad really creeped me out, so I would try to pick up the boys and just leave the house as soon as I possibly could. However, there were mornings where I would walk in and have to make conversation with the dad for 30 minutes because he had made the 5-year-old buffalo chicken wings and Mountain Dew for breakfast at 7 a.m. The child was 5 and already severely overweight. The parents were overly permissive. The dad was the worst and let the boys do whatever they wanted. So naturally, the 5-year-old never wanted to leave and always wanted to stay with his dad. To say the kid had tantrums about leaving his house is an understatement. One day, he laid down on the driveway, screaming so loud that I thought that I was expecting the neighbors to call the police. I couldn't pick him up because he was 100 pounds of dead weight, laying face down on the driveway. I had to call the mom after 20 minutes to finally get him in the car. One time, the 5-year-old screamed at me, "Look what you made me do," because he dropped his sandwich on himself. One time I heard him crying bloody murder from another room. I ran to him, and he was clutching his foot and screaming. Thought he had sprained or broken his ankle because of how much he was crying. I inspected his foot carefully for a few minutes, because he wouldn't tell me what happened. I looked at him probably about 15 minutes to tell me that he had stubbed his toe. He also had overtly inappropriate dance moves that he would do at the pool in front of the girls/women. He would also talk down to women and girls and exhibit overly flirtatious behavior at 5 years old. Most people thought it was funny, but it concerned me because I knew that he learned it from his dad. I spent that whole summer being screamed at and verbally abused by an overweight 5-year-old. A few years later, the parents got divorced, and I was asked to be a witness. I said no. When I was younger, I had a bad fear of storms. I was babysitting 3 kids. I was about 13. The youngest one was napping, and the other 2 were eating. They had the TV on, and suddenly a tornado warning for our area came on the screen. I froze. I was terrified and had to take a moment to process everything. The 2 who saw the warning knew what it meant and started really freaking out. Before I could stop her, the oldest ran upstairs to grab her American Girl dolls, and I shouted after her. I finally collected myself enough to tell the child remaining at the table to go in the basement and get blankets. I ran upstairs to get the youngest one who was napping, and of course the light in his room wouldn't turn on, so I stumbled through the room to get him. Remember, I'm terrified of weather in the first place, so I'm completely freaking out on the inside that I have to take care of myself, plus 3 kids and a dog. Finally, I get all of the kids down to the basement, behind the bar that the parents were building. As I sat down, part of the bar fell off, and I gashed my leg open. So now, I'm trying to staunch the bleeding, keep the kids calm and safe, and keep myself calm. I thought I was going to die. The tornado never even came close. We were totally fine. Everything turned out well, but it was still one of the scariest moments of my entire life. I was about 14. We lived in military housing, and there was a new couple with 2 kids who were referred to me. The house was pretty empty. They had only been there a week or so, and the mom was showing me around with the 3-month-old baby in her arms. I was a little worried. 3 months old was the youngest baby I'd ever sat, and the mom thought similarly. They were only going to go to their welcoming event for a couple of hours, and it was right there on base though, so not far. What could go wrong? What went wrong was at the top of the staircase. As her 3-year-old called her, and she was following me down, a strap on her sandal broke, and she suffered a catastrophic fall, taking me out as she toppled, dropping the baby in her arms. Well, I'm not sure how it happened, as I'm not exactly famous amongst my friends for my grace, but as I was being bulldozed over, I reached up and snatched the baby out of the air and held her up high as we fell. I ended up with a black eye and some bruises, where Mom essentially tackled me. The baby was completely unscathed. The mom ended up with an open fracture of one leg, right above her knee, and a decent concussion. She didn't act as if anything hurt at all though. She just kept on saying, "You saved my baby. You saved my baby," as the dad called the ambulance. I think they paid me $200 for a 4-hour gig that night, which in 1987 wasn't too shabby, but I don't think that my pulse slowed down for an entire week. I pretty much stopped babysitting shortly after that, because it freaked me out so much. Not just the event, but word getting around that I was like some superhero with cat-like reflexes, when I'm pretty sure if that happened again, I couldn't grab that baby if I tried. When I was in high school, I regularly tutored an 11-year-old girl, and the parents had me babysit her and her twin a couple of times. One time, the parents were meant to go downtown to a game and then be back around 12. Around 8 or so, it started raining very heavily. I live in a Gulf city, and storms can blow in fast and turn into flooding really quickly. Once it became clear we were in for a big storm, the parents tried to head home early, but the streets had already started to flood, and they ended up trapped in a parking lot. The parents called, and we agreed that I'd spend the night in their guest bedroom. I had the kids go to bed and set up in the kitchen to do homework and watch Netflix. After a bit of this, I noticed water seeping in from under the back doors. They had a large house with like 3 double doors to the back, so it was a crap load of area. I got every towel in the house and started wiping up the water and using the towels to block the door. After this had been mostly cleaned up, I went back to the kitchen table to watch more Netflix. Not even 15 minutes later, the power cuts out, and all the lights shut off. This freaked me out a bit, but I tried to stay calm. Then the burglar alarm went off in the other room. I pretty much crapped myself. I was in a pitch black house with 2 kids, surrounded by flooded roads that no one can drive on. After a minute, I realized that I was the closest thing in the house to an adult. So I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife that they had and went to go check all the doors. They were still closed and no one was in the house, so I called the parents. It turns out the alarm went off when the power cut out, and I just needed to shut it off with a code upstairs. This happened about 3 more times over the next few hours. After the power came back on, I thought things had chilled out, but then we got a tornado warning. I went and got the kids from upstairs, and we all hung out in the sturdy basement for about an hour until the warning passed. At this point, it was about 2 a.m., and I passed out in the guest bedroom. The parents woke me up when they got home around 7 a.m., and I drove home past giant fallen branches and stalled abandoned cars. It was surreal. I was 16, and my friend Amanda was 14. We were watching her cousins for the weekend. Paul was around 4 to 6 years old, and Stella was 10 or 11. So we watched them Friday, and it went fine. Their mom came home Saturday, paid us $30 and got some clothes and left. So we decided that we'd walk to the convenience store to get some candy, junk food, soda, and rent a few movies. We were bad at making money because we literally spent everything that we made to have a movie night with the kids. So the store was 2 blocks away. Amanda and Paul wanted to cut through yards to get home, but Stella didn't want to. So I told Amanda to take him home, and me and Stella would just take the sidewalk. We could pretty much see their house from the store, and it was around 7 p.m. in the summer, so it wasn't too late. It was literally a 5-minute walk on the sidewalk. So me and Stella were walking. We were almost at the corner to turn onto their street. The house right before the corner was a drug house. Out walks this guy, and me, being my friendly Canadian self, says hi politely. The guy stops and says something along the lines of, "Wait, I know you, right?" I told him no, I don't know him. He looks at Stella and says, "I know her. I'm friends with your dad." Her dad was into drugs pretty heavily. He starts asking why I have her with me. I tell him I'm babysitting with my friend. Probably very dumb of me. He starts getting closer, told me that I was pretty and says, "Oh, are you going home? Why don't I come too? We can all hang out. You teen girls like to party, right?" The guy's eyes were like pin drops. He was clearly high. I grabbed Stella's hand and kind of pushed her behind me, well, holding her hand because I'm starting to get scared, and I wanted to keep her away. Right then, my friend comes outside and sees us and yells for us to hurry our butts up. I look at Stella and just say run. We run, still holding her hand because I don't want her to fall behind. The guy just stood there. Once we got into the house and watched from the window till he left. I told Amanda what happened, and we called the kid's mom, but she said that it was fine and that stuff happens. We were in a poor part of town. So I'm still weirded out, and Stella is still a little scared. So we all decided to watch a movie in the living room, which is right where the front door is. I grab a large knife from the kitchen, and I sit on the side table. We kind of forgot for a while because we just watched the movie. Like, when I got the knife, I was kind of joking. I didn't think the guy would actually show up. But about a half an hour later, someone starts banging on the door and yelling to open up. Now, normal people would call the cops, but I'm half dumb and half ballsy. I tell Amanda to take the kids into the kitchen, and once they're out of sight, I open the door a crack. It's the weird guy. He was talking a lot. He said something about knowing where Stella's mom lived, so he knew where I'd be. I try telling him that he has to leave, but he just starts to get closer. I should have just slammed the door, but I got scared and backed up. I grabbed the knife as I'm backing up and held it behind my back. By this time, he's pushed the door open and is standing in the doorway. I kept telling him that he needed to get out, and he said something about me being there alone. Since they were hiding, he thought it was me there alone now. Right then, Amanda comes out of the kitchen. Kitchen doorway is right across from the front door. The kids are half hiding behind her as much as two kids can hide behind an 80-pound, 5'0" 14-year-old. Amanda is holding a huge butcher knife. The guy looks and sees her. I step back and bring the knife that I have out from behind my back and hold it at my side. Amanda yells at him to get out. I tell him, "You need to get out of here before we stab you." Dude bolted so quick that he didn't even shut the door. We called the kid's mom and told her the dude showed up and pretty much forced his way in. We even told her that he didn't leave until he knew that we had knives, and she told us to just lock the door and we'd be fine. We called Amanda's mom and told her. She picked us all up, and we all slept in Amanda's bed that night. Well, Paul was asleep by midnight. Me, Amanda, and Stella didn't fall asleep until well after 4 a.m. We watched the kids at her mom's for 2 more days. Then I went home, and I think Amanda had them another day or 2. I watched them with Amanda a few more times at their house, and nothing bad ever happened again. It's been 9 years. I talk to Stella from time to time. She's told me before that she remembers that night, and that she thought that the guy was going to kill us. And all this because my Canadian butt thinks that it's rude to walk by someone and not say hi. I wasn't the babysitter, but instead the one being babysat by my older cousin. We, my brother and I, were curled up asleep in her bed. She was between us. I awoke to my cousin screaming, "Get out. I said get out." My aunt and uncle came running up the stairs to find the door to the balcony of her bedroom open. She said that she had seen a man crawling across her floor, but she had thought that she was just dreaming. But then he stood up at the foot of the bed and loomed over us. That's when she started screaming. She saw him run out the door and jump over the 2nd-story balcony. Initially, all the adults, her parents and my parents, thought that she had just dreamed it. But then there was a flashlight found at the base of the big pecan tree that grew alongside the house. At that point, everyone realized that it was not a dream. I was maybe 12 years old and watching 2 little girls. I had only watched them once before, so I was still really trying to impress their mom. They lived in a crappy part of town, and we didn't play outside very often. This night, I was to spend the night and sleep on their couch. In the living room, there was a door that led outside to their backyard. The front door was directly across the little townhouse from the back door. Off to the right, looking towards the front door, was a kitchen, and on the left was the stairs that led to the 2nd floor bedrooms and bathroom. When you opened the front door all the way, the door blocked off access to the stairwell. At some point, I fell asleep on the couch and was snapped awake. There, standing in the house by the back door, is a very drunk man. He's dirty, he's drunk, and he's walking towards me. My 12-year-old mind was panicking, and I knew that if I called the police, I'd be attached to the wall by the phone, and I couldn't prevent him from going upstairs. They didn't have a cordless phone yet. I immediately started talking to this man. He says he's looking for someone, and he's going to go upstairs. I bolt off the couch and beat him to the front door. That's when I noticed headlights out front. Through the peephole, I see it's a taxi, and I fling the door all the way open and start yelling for the driver to help me. He rolled his window up and shrugged. I don't know how I did it, but I managed to stand in front of the wide open door and block his way up the stairs. He's pushing me hard, and all I can think of are these little girls asleep in their beds, and I remember that he's looking for someone who doesn't live here. I say, hey, Rosie and Trevor are waiting for you in the cab. Look, they're waving at you, dude." He buys it and walks out the front door just enough for me to slam and lock it. I run to the back door and I lock that too. After him banging on the door for a few minutes, he goes around back and tries to get back in. He leaves in the taxi cab, and I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I never told anyone, never phoned the police, and never, ever went to bed again without locking all the doors and windows. This isn't my story, but my friend Linda's. This happened back in the 70s on a big cattle ranch in the middle of nowhere, Kansas. The farm had a huge wraparound porch that was very creaky, so you could always tell when someone was approaching the door. The kids were asleep when suddenly there came a knock on the door. Linda was surprised since she had not heard any of the normal creaky footsteps, but she opened the door and nobody was there. Linda was puzzled, but thought that maybe it was a mistake. 5 minutes later, the same knock at the door with no creaking sounds on the porch. Once again, nobody was there. When she first told me this story, I asked Linda why she would keep opening the door, and she said in that area, there was really nothing to fear, and it was a kind of community where doors were not locked and so forth. About 5 more minutes passed, with one more disembodied knock, and then it stopped for the night. The farm couple got home very late, so she didn't have a chance to mention it to them. However, the following morning, the rancher called her to ask if she had seen or heard anything unusual the evening before, so she told him the story then. Turned out that something, and they never did find out what, caused an enormous herd of cattle to stampede in the night, and they were ranging all over the surrounding farmland. They assumed that it might have been teens playing a prank, except that nothing like that has ever happened in that area before, and it never did since either. That story has always frightened me. I'm generally not one who enjoys or is good at watching other people, not even for money and free food. But there are 2 times that I did, and both were awful. The first was my niece, who was around 6 at the time. She was incredibly wild, and well, very crazy at times as well. She'd throw fits over nothing, and it was like watching an exorcism movie. She'd be crazy strong. She'd bite and growl and get very violent. A few months before the night in question, she tried to stab a cop with a pair of scissors. Yes, you read that correctly. So yeah, I was very scared of being alone with a first grader. I noticed that she's been too quiet, so I look for her, and I find her with her dog, a smallish poodly thing. I don't know dogs that well, and a sharpened pencil raised over its head, and exclaimed that she was helping the dog go to heaven so she could get a cat instead. So I save and hide the dog, at which point she goes to the large locked plexiglass cage where my 3 parrots live. She pries and forces the lock open, then soaks my birds with Windex for no reason. Luckily I caught her, washed them off, and they weren't hurt. Nothing else happened that night, but that was more than enough. I wasn't alone with her again for about 8 years. I was almost positive that she was on the path to being a serial killer, but surprisingly, as a teenager, she's much better and hasn't tried to murder anyone recently. The only other time that I watched anyone was in high school, when I was watching my 90-year-old grandfather while my parents were out. He'd been a little off, hence the watching. Unfortunately, a little off quickly became very off. He started insisting that there were children running around the house, asking where their parents were and yelling at them to leave. There were no children, just me, and telling him that only made him angry. He went back upstairs and came back with a surprise loaded shotgun that no one knew that he even owned, and proceeded to walk around the house hunting the children. He didn't shoot, thank God, but he did leave a lit cigarette on the pile of papers, and then go outside to yell at more things that weren't there. I had to call and beg my parents to come home. Turned out to be an issue with his medication. I realized that this makes it look like I live with a band of criminals, but I swear that that's not the case. Okay, 2 times I babysat, one with an actual baby. He was 1 at the time, and I house sat/puppy sat for a friend another time. I had done a few others, but these 2 were the creepiest. Okay, here's the 1-year-old story. I was friends with his mom and aunt. Actually, more of a friend of the aunt, and I was visiting. The sister needed a ride and asked if I could stay to watch her kid while my friend, her sister, drove to get a few things. I said sure, mainly because she had already put him to bed and it shouldn't be any work at all. This was around 7 p.m. They leave, and about 15 minutes later I hear a thump. Now both of their rooms are next to each other, and my friend has her cat locked in her room, because her sister and I have allergies to the cat. Anyway, I assume it's the cat, and I just continue to watch TV in the living room. Then 5 more minutes go by and I hear a smaller thump. So I go and check on the cat first. I know, kind of a bad move, but I was thinking logically that it was the cat, and I figured if I calmed it down it would stop acting out and not wake up the kid. Well, I opened up the door, and the cat is asleep on my friend's pillow. At first, I thought the little jerk was just pretending or something, and while staring at the cat I hear the thump again. But this time, it's clear that it's coming from the other room where the kid is. I immediately freak out, thinking that the kid fell out of his crib or something. And before I could even close my friend's door, the cat freaks out and hides under the bed, and the kid in the next room starts to cry, which definitely makes me feel like he did fall. So I shut the door and go to the next room, open the door quickly, and he's standing up in his crib crying. I feel relieved that he didn't fall, and I go to calm him down. Now mind you, for some reason the electrical doesn't work so well in her room. The light switch doesn't work, so you have to turn on the floor lamp by hand. So I'm in a dark room, minus the small nightlight, with a crying baby. It then dawns on me, what the heck was making that noise? So I turn on the light and look around. Her closet is open, and some of the stuff seems to be moved around, but nothing that looked like it fell several times or anything like that. So I closed the closet, mainly because the kid was crying while staring at the closet. And being the horror movie geek that I am, I was like, okay, closing the closet. He seemed to have calmed down, and it took me 5 minutes to get him back to sleep. I left the light on and the door cracked open so I could keep an ear out, but not wake him up myself with the TV. Anyway, that lasted about 10 minutes. Then I hear another thump noise. I get up and peek in. The kid is still asleep, so I open the door some more and the closet is open. Now, it's a sliding door closet, which isn't as creepy as a walk-in closet with an actual door. But closets in general are really creepy, especially at night. Anyway, my first instinct is to run, but I man up and go check out the closet to see what could have happened, or whatever. And nothing. I just told myself maybe it's a mouse or something. A big mouse that can open a closet door. So like I said, I closed it up, checked on the kid still, left the light on, and went back to the living room. Not even 5 minutes go by and he's crying. There was no noise this time, so I figured maybe it was a normal baby cry, like the light was bothering him or he peed or something. So I go in again. This time, the closet is only open a little bit. I'm extremely freaked out. I've already texted my friend telling him to get the heck back home. So I go towards the closet door to close it. My hand reaches for the edge, and then I hear a small thump, and then one of those baby police car toys that have the siren effect goes off in the closet. I open it up slowly, and there it was just going off. The kid is still crying his head off, and I know for sure that this toy was not in the closet. So I take it out, put it away, and close the closet door. I put the kid back to sleep and wait in the room with him. He didn't go back to sleep, but I could tell that he tired himself out with the crying fit that he had. He laid there staring at me, almost like he was telling me to get the heck out of there. I felt so uneasy in that room, like someone or something was watching me and it was angry, especially from the area where the closet was. So after about 15 minutes of waiting in the room, I stand up and start to head out. The light then turns off, which is odd since you have to turn it on and off manually since the wall switch doesn't work. I figured the light bulb blew out or something, so I walked over using what little light the nightlight offered as a guide towards the lamp. After I got to the lamp, I heard the closet door sliding open. I don't think I've ever been so scared in my life, and my instincts kicked in, like turn on the light, and I felt for the switch on the lamp to turn it on, hoping that it would, and it did. Looking back, I was both relieved and creeped out that the light bulb didn't burn out, and that it somehow turned off by itself. Anyway, the light was back on. I turned around, and luckily, nothing, or rather, I didn't see anything there. I grabbed the kid and shut the closet again, shut the door to the room behind me, and held him in the living room till his mom and my friend got back, almost 9 p.m. At first, she was angry that I took him out of his crib and that he was awake, but I was like, you need an exorcist or someone to bless your house, because things aren't okay here. I don't think she really believed me. She said that she'd noticed some small things happening, but nothing to that effect. That was almost a year ago, and apparently nothing that drastic ever happened again. Weird stuff happens to me and around me often. I've been told that I was a magnet for these things before, so I'm not sure if whatever happened because I was there, or maybe I brought it with me or activated it or whatever. They did do a prayer of some kind to try and bless the house/apartment. Maybe that helped. Well, okay. I think I wrote long enough, so I'll save the puppy sitting story for another time. So I know this is kind of late, but I finally got some free time to sit down and write this. I live in a rural area, and the nearest Walmart and Target are about 30 minutes away, just to give an example. So my friend at the time, who lives in another small town nearby up in the mountains, a town called Wrightwood, asked me to puppy sit/house sit. I agreed. A free mini vacation away from home, and I actually like the dog. A big, sweet-hearted black lab mix named Lainey, or however she spelt it. Anyway, I drove up to the house, saw my friend off, and made myself at home. And after settling in, I took the dog out for a walk. This was about 3 p.m., so the sun was still out, but it was cooler and shadier out. Anyway, we get back home. I make myself some dinner and then feed the dog her dinner. I turn on the TV and ended up dozing off for a bit. When I woke up, it was later at night, around 9 p.m. or so. I get up to walk around and stretch. Lainey was sleeping on the floor next to me and stayed in her spot even after I got up to move. I decided to take a tour of the house since I didn't really get one when I arrived, since my friend was leaving so shortly after I arrived. So it was a decent-sized house. 2 bathrooms and 4 bedrooms, including the master bedroom. The master bedroom was on the left side of the house, all by itself, with an ensuite bathroom. The other 3 rooms were on the opposite side of the house, down along the hallway, and at the end of the hallway was the other bathroom. In the middle of the house was the kitchen and dining/living room. My friend had just recently moved in. She was there for about a month, but had only lived in it for like 3 weeks due to business trips. The house also had very big windows too, which made it kind of creepy at night, especially because the windows in the living room, which faced the small backyard, didn't have curtains or blinds. Not that she had any neighbors behind her, but still, it was a little creepy. So I look around. The 3 extra rooms were just being used as storage at the time. One she was going to make into an office, and either one or both of the others into guest rooms. After I was done, I closed all the doors back up like they were. I checked the rest of the house for my lockdown procedure. I turn off all the lights, the kitchen, and go back to watching TV. Midnight rolls around and Lainey starts whining, so I let her out in the backyard to go pee. She runs around sniffing and whatever, usual dog stuff. I'm freezing cold standing in the doorway, asking her to hurry up, when I hear a crashing noise from inside. It gets my attention, and also Lainey's. So I turn around, peek my head in to see if it happened to be the kitchen or the living room. I can't see anything, and just figure that something fell in one of the rooms. Lainey finishes and comes in. I close up behind her, and I decide to go down the hallway to see what fell over. Lainey followed me to the entrance of the hallway, but then stopped and started to whimper. Her tail went between her legs, and she started to growl a bit. At first, I thought that maybe she was growling and scared of me because I didn't turn on the hall light. So it was dark. So maybe she didn't recognize me, so I called out to her so that she would know that it was just me. But she was still scared. So I opened up the first door, and I look around, and nothing seems to have fallen over. I leave, close the door, look over at Lainey, who is now laying on the floor at the entrance of the hallway, still whimpering. I open up the other room across the hall. Same thing, everything looked fine. I closed the door and went into the third room. There, I found a small box had fallen over. I go and pick everything up and move the box elsewhere. Then I noticed that the window was opened a bit, so I scared myself thinking that someone broke in. But I realized how dumb that was because there wasn't anywhere to find in the room, and I would have heard the door opening and closing if they had left the room. I close up the window and I lock it, and I check the other rooms and lock them up too. I go back out to watch TV, and Lainey lays down at my feet and seems better now. I start to doze off again. I'm about to fall asleep, and then Lainey just starts barking and acting berserk over by the hallway, just barking at the dark. I'm half asleep and freaking out, thinking, oh no, someone did get in. I go over and turn on all the lights, and I notice that the third bedroom door was open a little bit, the same room where the box fell. So as a cliche, I panic, go into the kitchen and grab a knife, and then I go to the room. The window was still closed, and nothing seemed out of place. I go, check out all the other rooms in the bathroom, and even the master and its bathroom. No one to be found. I put away the knife, and I see that it's 2 a.m. I decide to head to bed. I was staying in the master bedroom. Lainey came with me, and I closed the master bedroom door. I just had this feeling that I should. I get into bed. Lainey goes to her little corner where her bed is, and I try to fall asleep. I wake up to a huge slamming noise. I'm all disoriented, and Lainey is barking and jumps on the bed and barks towards the door. I get up and try to calm her down. I get my glasses on and go see what it was. It sounded like a door being slammed shut. I get out to the living room. Everything looked fine. Same with the kitchen. I get to the hallway, and all the doors are closed, but in the third bedroom the light is on. I can see it coming in there at the bottom of the door. I then hear growling. I turn around and it's Lainey. The hair on the back of her neck was straight up, and her teeth were showing like she was getting ready to tear someone apart. I whisper, "Good girl, get ready to attack." I creep over to the door. I waved at Lainey to come over, but she didn't, so I knew that I was truly in this alone. I open the door, and no one's there. Now, I know I turned off the light, and I know I locked up the house, but the light was on, and the boxes had been moved around, almost like they'd been thrown, but none of them opened up. It was just freaking me out. I noticed it was like 3:15 a.m., so I heard the slamming noise at 3 a.m., since it did take me a few minutes to build up the courage to leave the master bedroom and to open up the other room. I turn off the light, close the door, and go back to the master bedroom. I couldn't sleep. I had the small TV on in my friend's room. Lainey was on the bed with me, and I just couldn't relax. Finally, around 6:30 a.m., the sunlight was just peeking in, and my eyes were getting heavy. It felt like it was okay enough to go get some sleep. So my friend was due back later that evening, so I knew that I had some time to sleep during the morning. then get up and look like I've been somewhat productive that day. So I get my sleep, and finally, Lainey wakes me up whining her usual whine to go pee. I get up and let her outside. I see that it's noon. I go back inside and look around the house. I get to the hallway, and all the doors are wide open. I peek in each one, and no one's in them. I close all the doors and watch TV, feeling like I'm being watched. P.S. Lainey was back inside with me again. So I'm watching TV. I get a text from my friend saying that she'll be home even earlier, and she's actually on her way home now. I'm thrilled, but also worried for her. And an hour and a half later, she gets home, and she asks how Lainey was, and I told her that she was amazing. And then I sort of go quiet and sort of mumble something like, "But your house wasn't." She was like, "What?" And I told her straightforward, "Weird stuff happened last night, and either you have an invisible ninja kicking around boxes in your house, or there's something ghostly here." Well, she finally comes clean and tells me that the house is like 60 years old, so it has a history. An old man passed away there in the master bedroom. Some kid went missing from the house back in the day, and some other weird stuff. I tell her that it felt like something else. I didn't feel the old man's presence, or a missing kid that may have been killed. This was something dark, or at least it felt like it. I don't know. She didn't end up staying too long after anyway. She got tired of commuting back and forth from the city, and ended up finding a place down there for her and Lainey. And by the way, she was just renting the house. She didn't buy it. So she was able to go without having to worry about selling the house or anything like that. I've driven by the house a couple of times since then. I still get a weird vibe from there. Well, that's my story. Probably lame, but it felt scarier for me when I babysat the little boy. The house was slightly isolated, and I was alone except for a dog. At least the other time I was in an apartment complex, so there were lots of people around to hear me scream for help if needed, and I had the kid with me, which I could carry if I had to run for my life. So yeah. Also, I remember that when I had dozed off a few of the times on the couch, I felt like something was standing over me, and one of the times I woke up on the couch, I felt like someone had been touching me or grabbing my arm. It was so weird. I was babysitting a couple of siblings, a brother and sister, and the sister had a friend over to play with as well. The two girls were 5. The boy was probably 7 or 8, a little bit older. I was watching them during the day on a weekend because their single mom had to go into work. When I got to the house, the boy was zoned out watching TV, and the little girls were playing with dolls in another room. The morning went fine, but in the afternoon, as I was making lunch, I hear screams in the backyard. I run back there, and the boy is wielding a seriously sharp kitchen knife. The two little girls have barricaded themselves into one of those plastic playhouses and are screaming in terror, and the boy is madly stabbing the knife through the slits in the windows, laughing. As I run over, I'm shouting at him to stop, but he just keeps stabbing, and I have to tackle him and wrestle the knife away. I ended up getting cuts on my hands in the process, and the boy was kicking, punching, and biting trying to get out of my grasp. I somehow managed to drag him away and throw him in his room and call his mom at work. She comes home a few hours early, clearly angry that I called her and grumbling about how he obviously wasn't going to hurt the girls. She gave him a good smack, but basically told me that I was a bad babysitter. I was not that old myself, only 12 and terrified, so I just nodded and went home without getting paid. My sister was a nanny for a wealthy family. She was having a bad time with kidney stones and asked if I could assist her for a few days. I agreed. First off, it was a really strange family, but whatever, I could handle it. They had a 7-year-old son and a 3-year-old twins. a boy and a girl. The mother is out on a date. The kids are in bed, and my sister and I were up in her room eating dinner and watching TV. All of a sudden, we hear a loud bang. We turn all the lights on downstairs and check the house. Apparently, there was a large bar across the basement door, and it was clear that it had been knocked down. Someone was trying to break into the house. My sister gets on the phone and calls the police. I'm guarding the stairs in case anyone is in the house. I want to protect the kids. The oldest wakes up. We don't want him to be scared. I told her, go upstairs with him, and I would wait for the police. I stayed at the stairs holding 2 knives, in case I needed to defend myself. After what felt like an eternity, the police showed up. They weren't sure if someone tried to break in or not, but they made sure that no one was in the house and took a report. There had been break-ins in the neighborhood, so it wasn't unreasonable to think that someone had tried to break in, and turning the lights on scared them off. We couldn't get a hold of the mother or father. He no longer lived there, but we handled it. A day later, I'm watching the kids in the backyard. The oldest runs up to me and says, "Look what I found." It was a hunting knife. I told him I needed him to hand it to me. I also let him know that he wasn't in trouble. He hadn't done anything wrong, since I was clearly upset. I asked the mother and father. He was visiting, and it wasn't theirs, so we called the police. Unfortunately, I had to touch the knife to take it from the child, so I likely messed up any prints that were on it. The officer understood. She agreed that taking the knife away from the 7-year-old was the best option. It was found by the basement door, so clearly someone had tried to break in. I was pretty freaked out. The one thing that I was pleased with was finding out that I had the ability to stay calm under pressure. I was able to put the kids first, think clearly, and do what I needed to do. I can't even explain how happy I was to leave that place and never go back. The family was incredibly strange, and I felt really bad for the kids. I was babysitting my little sister while my grandparents were out of town. We lived with our grandparents. When we hear my grandparents' bedroom door open, I grabbed the only weapon that I had, a mini Yankees baseball bat, and was just sitting with my sister quietly in my room. We heard someone walk down the hall to the kitchen when I called my uncle to come check on us. This whole time, I wasn't completely convinced that what I was hearing was real. So 10 minutes later, he arrives and comes in through our front gate. We had a large outdoor courtyard, and he comes and searches the house. We go into our grandparents' bedroom, and their sliding glass door to the courtyard was open, and the chair in front of it was pushed forward, propping up the blinds. So someone had clearly entered the house, but my uncle searched the house and no one was there. We assumed that whoever it was had probably left the house when he heard someone come, so my uncle left. After that, my sister and I were in the kitchen eating some food when the doorknob to the garage door starts rattling. First softly, then harder. The knob was broken and almost impossible to use. So I grabbed my sister, ran out the front gate, got in my car, and left. I have never been so scared in my life. Thank you so much for listening to all of the stories in this video. I hope you enjoyed them. I also hope that you enjoy the extra campfire sounds in the background. Good night, everyone, and I'll read to you in the next video. Bye-bye now.